I bring you your coffee every day because you're the only one who treats me like a human, the pregnant employee cried, tears streaming down her face. The elderly woman rose from the bench, trembling, but the man in the suit watched everything from the shadows. Guardian Angel Plaza had never witnessed a scene like that mornings. The sun was barely peeking through the towering skyscrapers surrounding the small green oasis in the heart of the city's most exclusive financial district. But a crowd was already gathering around one of the wooden benches adorning the park. You have no right to be here. This is a space for decent people, not for your kind. Victoria Caldwell's shrill voice echoed like a whip cutting through the morning air. She was a middle-aged woman, impeccably dressed, her face bearing that expression of superiority that only decades of privilege can sculpt into human features. On the bench, trying to make herself invisible but failing miserably, was Chloe Ramirez. She wore a perfectly ironed maid's uniform, despite having been working since before dawn. Her 6-month pregnant belly created a curve she couldn't hide, no matter how much she tried to shrink. Her hands held 2 disposable coffee cups with such care that she seemed to be carrying invaluable treasures. "Mom, please, I'm just waiting for someone." Chloe's voice trembled, but she maintained an unbreakable dignity that brutally contrasted with her vulnerable situation. "Waiting for someone. Don't make me laugh." Victoria approached closer, her expensive perfume clashing with the simple aroma of coffee. "People like you don't have appointments in this plaza. You clean offices at night and disappear before real people come to work." A group of office workers had stopped to observe the scene. Some looked at their cell phones, pretending not to see anything. Others watched with a morbid curiosity that made Chloe feel as if she were being exhibited in a human zoo. "I work in the Sterling Tower business complex," Chloe replied, chin held high, refusing to let the burning tears in her eyes fall. "I work honestly and have as much right as anyone to sit on this public bench." "Sterling Tower." Victoria let out a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "My husband is the COO of that building. Surely you clean the restrooms I use when I go to visit him, and now you pretend to sit where I walk." What Victoria didn't know was that every word she uttered was being heard not only by curious passers-by, but also by someone very specific who watched from a carefully calculated distance. Marcus Sterling stood in the shade of an ancient tree. His tailored suit and relaxed posture contrasted with the intensity of his gaze. At 38, he was the heir to Sterling Corporation, a business empire that controlled half the buildings in that financial district, including Sterling Tower. But no one in that plaza would recognize him because Marcus had perfected the art of voluntary invisibility. There was something in the way the young employee held those coffee cups, in how her body instinctively protected her belly while facing public humiliation, that made something inside Marcus stir painfully. It was the same protective gesture his mother had made when he was a child, and she worked cleaning houses to support them both. "Do you know what bothers me about people like you?" Victoria continued her verbal assault, fueled by the silent audience that had formed. "You think that because you're carrying a baby, you deserve special compassion. But we all know the truth. You probably don't even know who the father is." That was the last straw. Chloe stood up with a speed that surprised everyone, the coffee cups trembling in her hands but not spilling a drop. Her face, which had maintained an expression of controlled dignity, now showed a mix of pain and fury that made several spectators involuntarily step back. "You want to know the truth?" Chloe's voice no longer trembled. It resonated with a force that seemed to come from a deep place within her soul. "The truth is, I bring this coffee every day to Mrs. Eleanor because she's the only person in this entire district who treats me like a human, the only one who asks how I am, the only one who looks me in the eyes instead of looking through me as if I were invisible." Tears finally began to stream down Chloe's cheeks, but they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of rage, of accumulated exhaustion, of months of being treated as less than human by people who thought they were superior simply because they had more money. "And yes, I'm pregnant. And yes, I work cleaning offices. Do you know why? Because my baby deserves a future, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to give it to them. I work from 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. I clean the floors where people like you walk without even looking down, and every penny I earn goes straight into savings for my child." The crowd had grown considerably. Among the new onlookers was an older man with completely white hair, simply dressed, but with a natural dignity that emanated from every pore of his being. He slowly approached the circle that had formed around the 2 women. "My baby's father," Chloe continued, her voice now laden with a pain that made even the most cynical feel a pang in their hearts. "He died months ago in a construction accident. He was working without proper safety equipment, because the company he worked for decided that saving money was more important than protecting lives. He left behind a child he'll never know, and a wife who's doing everything she can to survive. The silence that followed was so profound that one could hear the wind rustling the leaves of the trees. Victoria had paled considerably, but her pride was too great to allow her to retreat. "That's very sad," she said in a voice that tried to sound compassionate, but only managed to be condescending. "But it doesn't change the fact that you shouldn't be here. There are appropriate places for people in your situation." It was at that precise moment that a different voice cut through the air, a voice that made several people in the crowd turn with immediate recognition. And where exactly would that appropriate place be? Marcus Sterling had emerged from the shadows, walking with measured steps towards the center of the conflict. His presence had a weight that made people instinctively part for him. Some of the office workers recognized him immediately and began whispering among themselves with urgency. Victoria turned to him with a smile that instantly froze on her lips when she recognized who he was. "Mr. Sterling, I didn't know that I heard every word you said," Marcus interrupted her with a calm that was more terrifying than any shout. "And I'm the actual owner of Sterling Tower, not your husband, who simply manages a small section of the building." Victoria's face went from pale to ashen in a matter of seconds. Chloe, for her part, watched the scene in complete confusion, not understanding who this man was who had appeared out of nowhere. Marcus went directly to Chloe, completely ignoring Victoria as if she had ceased to exist. "Excuse my intrusion, but I couldn't help but overhear. You said you bring Mrs. Eleanor coffee every day?" Chloe nodded slowly, still processing what was happening. "Yes, sir. Mrs. Eleanor sits here every morning, and I pass by on my way to my next job. It's just a small gesture." "A small gesture," Marcus repeated, and for the first time, his voice showed an emotion that wasn't calculated control. It was something softer, more genuine. "How long have you been doing this?" "Months, sir. Since I met her and she helped me when I fell in the plaza, because I was dizzy from the pregnancy. No one else stopped. Everyone just walked around me, but she knelt, helped me up, made sure I was okay." The older man with white hair who had been observing in silence finally spoke. "That would be my wife, sir. My name is Richard Hayes. Eleanor has told me about the young woman who brings her coffee every morning. She says it's the brightest part of her day." Marcus turned to Richard with an expression that was difficult to decipher. "Your wife is ill?" Richard nodded sadly. "She's been receiving treatment for the last year. Doctors say that coming to this plaza every morning, sitting on this bench, breathing fresh air, those are the little things that give her strength to continue. And this coffee," he pointed to the cups Chloe still held with trembling hands, "has become her little ritual of normalcy amidst the chaos." Chloe quickly wiped her tears. "I didn't know it was that serious, sir. She always smiles. She always asks about my baby. She always makes me feel important. Because you are important." A new voice joined the conversation. It was a silver-haired woman, leaning on a cane but walking with determination toward the group. Her eyes sparkled with life, despite her obvious physical fragility. "Chloe, my dear child, you're late today. I was worried." "Mrs. Eleanor." Chloe hurried to her, offering her one of the coffee cups with as much care as if she were handing over a sacred relic. "I'm so sorry. There was a slight delay." Eleanor took the coffee, but her eyes quickly scanned the scene, the crowd. Victoria trying to disappear into the background. Marcus observing everything with intensity and fresh tears on Chloe's cheeks. "Who made you cry?" Eleanor's voice had turned to steel. Despite her physical fragility, there was a strength in her that made several onlookers feel like children caught in mischief. "It's not important, Mrs. Eleanor." Chloe tried to smile. "The important thing is that I'm here now." "Oh, but it is important." Marcus intervened, his gaze finally moving to Victoria, who was trying to slip away through the crowd. "Mrs. Caldwell, isn't it? Your husband works at Sterling Tower. What a coincidence. I had a meeting with him tomorrow to discuss the renewal of his contract. I think we'll have a lot more to talk about now." Victoria stopped dead in her tracks, panic evident on her face. "Mr. Sterling, please, I didn't know. It was a misunderstanding." "It was not a misunderstanding." Eleanor spoke with a clarity that cut through any excuse. "It was deliberate cruelty towards someone you considered inferior. And that, madam, reveals much more about your character than any title or bank account." The crowd had begun to murmur, many recording on their cell phones. The digital age had turned every public space into a potential viral stage, and everyone knew that this story would have consequences extending far beyond this moment. But it was what happened next that no one expected. A young executive pushed through the crowd, her face showing an urgency that made everyone turn. "Mr. Sterling, I'm Agent Patricia Olson, HR manager for Sterling Tower. I need to speak with you immediately." Marcus frowned. "What's happening, Agent Olson?" Patricia looked at Chloe with an expression that mixed guilt and desperation. "It's about Mrs. Ramirez's husband. The accident she mentioned. Sir, there are irregularities in the reports that you need to see. Now." The world seemed to stop. Chloe instinctively put her hand to her belly, her face losing all color. "What kind of irregularities?" Patricia swallowed, clearly struggling with something she had been carrying for a long time. Evidence that the accident wasn't really an accident. The silence that fell over Guardian Angel Plaza at that moment was the kind of silence that precedes storms that change the landscape forever. And as Chloe swayed, supported by Eleanor and Richard, as Marcus Sterling processed the implications of what he had just heard, as the crowd watched with bated breath, no one knew that this was just the beginning of a story that would expose secrets buried for months, that would connect lives in ways impossible to predict, and that would prove that the simplest acts of kindness can trigger the most profound revolutions. Because sometimes a cup of coffee is just a cup of coffee, but other times it's the thread that, when pulled, unravels an entire web of lies, betrayals, and truths that someone desperately wanted to keep hidden. And in this case, that cup of coffee was about to reveal a truth that would shake the foundations of the entire financial district. Chloe's world had shrunk to a tiny point of consciousness. Agent Patricia Olson's words echoed in her mind like funeral bells that wouldn't stop ringing. The accident wasn't really an accident. Her legs began to give way, but before she could fall, she felt firm arms supporting her. "Breathe, my child, breathe." Eleanor's voice was an anchor in the storm that had broken out within Chloe. "You need to be strong now for yourself and for your baby." Richard had run to get water from a nearby fountain, while Marcus Sterling turned to Patricia Olson with an expression that made several spectators instinctively step back. It wasn't anger that emanated from him. It was something far more dangerous. Absolute determination. "Agent Olson." Marcus's voice was glacial. "You have exactly 60 seconds to explain what evidence you have and why it hasn't come to light until now." Patricia nervously looked at the crowd surrounding them, many still recording on their phones. "Mr. Sterling, this requires privacy. There are serious legal implications, aren't there?" Chloe's voice cut through the air like a knife. She had straightened up, gently pulling away from Eleanor's protective embrace. Her eyes, red from tears but burning with a maternal ferocity, fixed on Patricia. "No more secrets. No more private conversations where people decide for me what I should or shouldn't know. My husband is dead. My child will grow up without a father. If there's something I need to know it now." The crowd murmured with approval. Someone shouted, "Tell her the truth!" And the chorus grew until Patricia had no choice but to give in. "All right." Patricia opened her briefcase with trembling hands, pulling out a manila folder that seemed to have been consulted many times. "Months ago, your husband, Daniel Ramirez, was working on the construction of the new executive floor of Sterling Tower. The official report states that he fell from the 10th floor because his safety harness failed." Chloe closed her eyes. The memory of that day was still so fresh that she could feel the exact moment her life split in two. "That's what they told me. A terrible accident. Equipment failure." But it wasn't equipment failure. Patricia continued, her voice trembling now. "Weeks ago, a supervisor named Hector Miller came to my office, completely drunk, tormented by guilt. He confessed to me that the safety harnesses on that site had been inspected days before the accident, and all were in perfect condition." Marcus stepped closer, his imposing presence making Patricia speak faster. "Then what caused the fall?" "Someone deliberately cut Daniel's harness straps the night before the accident." Patricia dropped the words like bombs. "Hector saw him. He saw someone enter the construction site after hours, tamper with Daniel's equipment specifically, and then leave." The cry that came from Chloe was primal, a sound of pain so deep that it made several in the crowd wipe away tears. She doubled over, protecting her belly as she sobbed, with an intensity that seemed as if she would break into pieces. "They murdered my husband." The words came out between heartbreaking sobs. "It wasn't an accident. Someone killed him and made me believe it was my fault for asking him to take that job." Eleanor wrapped her in her arms, crying too, while Richard held both women with a strength that belied his advanced age. Guardian Angel Plaza had become a theater of human tragedy, where the lines between spectators and participants had completely blurred. Marcus Sterling felt a rage building inside him that he hadn't experienced in years. Who? Who was the person Hector saw? Patricia shook her head, tears running down her own cheeks. Hector couldn't clearly identify him. It was dark. The person wore a hood, but there was something else. Something Hector mentioned that doesn't make sense. What? Marcus demanded. He said he heard the person talking on the phone while tampering with the harness. And the words he heard were, "This will teach him to keep his mouth shut about what he saw." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that precedes revelations that change everything. Chloe slowly raised her head, her face devastated, but her mind clearly processing something. "Daniel called me the night before the accident." Her voice was barely a whisper, but everyone leaned in to listen. He was agitated, nervous. He told me he had seen something in the executive offices, something he shouldn't have seen. He was going to report it the next day. "What did he see?" Marcus asked, though something in his expression suggested he was already connecting dots no one else could see yet. "He didn't tell me," Chloe whispered. "I told him to be careful, not to get into trouble. I begged him to just do his job and forget whatever he had seen." And now her voice completely broke. "Now I know that if I had pushed harder, if I had convinced him to speak immediately, maybe he would be alive, wouldn't he?" Eleanor's voice was firm, despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's not your fault, my child. The fault lies with the person who decided that a human life was worth less than keeping a secret." A man in the crowd pushed his way forward. He was middle-aged, with the weathered face of someone who has worked with their hands all his life. "I worked with Daniel on that site. My name is Frank Davis, and there's something you all should know." All eyes turned to him. Frank seemed to be fighting an internal battle before finally deciding to speak. Daniel wasn't the only one who had seen something strange. Several of us noticed unusual movements in the executive floor offices at night. Documents being removed in boxes, computers being replaced, people coming and going at odd hours. But Daniel was the only one brave enough to say he was going to report it. "And why didn't any of you say anything after his death?" The question came from a young woman in the crowd, her voice laden with accusation. Frank lowered his head in shame. "Because we were all threatened. Days after the accident, a man came to the construction site. He never gave us his name, but he made it very clear that if anyone asked questions about Daniel's death, our families would suffer consequences. I have 4 children, madam. What was I supposed to do?" Marcus felt that each revelation was like a piece of a puzzle he had unknowingly been trying to solve for months. He turned to Patricia. "Why are you coming to me with this now? Why not before?" Patricia took a deep breath. "Because Hector Miller was found dead this morning. Apparently, he took his own life, according to initial police reports. But I know Hector had been terrified, saying someone was following him. And when I heard about this case, about Mrs. Ramirez being publicly humiliated, something in me just broke. I can't continue to be complicit in this." The crowd had grown considerably. Among the new onlookers was a woman in her 40s, who observed the scene with an intensity that made her presence feel different from the rest. She approached slowly, each step measured, until she was close enough for her voice to be heard clearly. "My name is Dr. Silvia Mendoza," she announced. "I'm the medical examiner who examined Daniel Ramirez's body after his death." Chloe looked at her with wide eyes, vaguely recognizing her from those horrible days after the accident, when everything was a blur of pain and legal procedures. "There's something in my report that has always bothered me," Dr. Mendoza continued. "The patterns of Daniel's injuries were not entirely consistent with a free fall. There were contusions on his wrists and forearms that suggested he had been struggling or fighting before falling." "What are you saying?" Marcus asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "I'm saying that it's possible Daniel wasn't just the victim of a sabotaged harness. It's possible someone was there on that floor when he fell. Someone who perhaps confronted him, who perhaps pushed him after the harness failed." Chloe's scream this time was not of pain, but of pure fury. "I want to know who. I want the name of the person who murdered my husband." Richard Hayes, who had been comforting his wife Eleanor throughout this revelation, stepped forward with an expression that suggested he was making a monumental decision. "I might be able to help with that," he said, in a voice that trembled slightly. "You see, I worked for 30 years as a security guard at Sterling Tower before retiring, and although I no longer officially work there, I maintain contact with many of my former colleagues. And," Marcus urged him to continue, "and one of them, a man named Tony Green, called me weeks ago. He was terrified. He told me he had reviewed the security footage from the night before Daniel Ramirez's accident and had seen something he couldn't believe. The air had become so tense it seemed solid. No one moved, no one breathed, all waiting for Richard's next words. "What did he see in those recordings?" Chloe asked, her voice hoarse from crying but laden with steely determination. "He saw Victoria Caldwell." Richard pointed to the woman who had tried to slip away through the crowd but was now frozen, her face completely white, entering the construction site at 2 a.m., remaining there for 20 minutes, and then leaving. All eyes turned to Victoria, like spotlights, finding a criminal in the dark. She began to shake her head frantically, backing away. "That's ridiculous. I had no reason to." "But your husband did," Marcus interrupted, and there was something in his voice that made everyone know he had just connected the last dot. "Your husband, who handles construction contracts, who approves budgets, who decides which suppliers receive the most lucrative jobs." Patricia Olson nodded slowly, her eyes widening with understanding. The documents that were being moved were contracts, inflated contracts, fake invoices, documented bribes. And Daniel Ramirez, Marcus continued, looking at Chloe with deep compassion, witnessed a meeting or saw documents that would expose the entire scheme, so they silenced him. Victoria was now completely surrounded. The crowd formed a circle that prevented her escape. Cell phone cameras captured every second, every expression of panic that crossed her face. "You can't prove anything," she cried desperately. "Those recordings could have been manipulated. Then you'll have no problem explaining." A new voice joined the conversation. "Why your electronic access card appears in the building's records at 2:17 a.m. on that specific date." The person who spoke was a uniformed police officer who had just arrived at the scene, alerted by multiple calls from passers-by. Next to him was a detective who looked at the situation with trained eyes that missed no detail. "I'm Detective Laura Chen," she announced, showing her badge, "and it seems we arrived just in time." Victoria tried to run, but the crowd didn't move. Not with violence. They simply stood firm, forming a human barrier of witnesses who would not allow justice to be evaded again. Chloe approached Victoria, each step measured, until she was face to face with the woman who had tried to humiliate her less than an hour earlier. Tears still streamed down her face, but there was a strength in her gaze that made Victoria avert her eyes. "You didn't just kill my husband." Chloe spoke in a voice trembling with contained emotion. "You killed the dreams we had. You killed mornings when my son would wake up with his father. You killed laughter we shared planning our future. And then, today, you had the audacity to treat me like trash, as if I were less than human. I didn't. I was just there because my husband asked me to." Victoria tried to excuse herself, but her voice was weak, unconvincing. "Your husband asked you to cut my Daniel's safety harness," Chloe completed, her voice rising. "He asked you to murder an innocent man whose only crime was having a conscience." Detective Chen approached, placing handcuffs on Victoria's wrists as she read her rights. But before she could lead her away, Eleanor stepped forward, leaning heavily on her cane. Her body fragile, but her spirit unbroken. "Mrs. Caldwell." Eleanor spoke with a clarity that cut through all the noise. "Today, a young pregnant woman brought me coffee who has more dignity in her little finger than you do in your entire body. She brought me that coffee, not because I asked for it, not because she expected anything in return, but because in a moment of need, I chose to see her humanity. And that simple choice created a friendship that has given me more joy in my last months than anything money can buy." Tears streamed freely down Eleanor's cheeks now. "But you chose contempt, you chose cruelty, and those choices led you to be an accomplice to murder. I hope that every day you spend in prison, you remember that it all began because you believed some people are worth less than others." As Detective Chen led Victoria away, who was now sobbing uncontrollably, Marcus Sterling approached Chloe. His eyes, which had observed the entire scene with an intensity that revealed layers of deeply personal emotion, now showed something few people in his life had ever seen: vulnerability. "Mrs. Ramirez," he began, his voice hoarse. "There's something I need to tell you, something no one here knows." Chloe looked at him, confused, emotionally exhausted, but still standing, still strong. "My mother worked cleaning offices when I was a child. She worked in this same district, in buildings that are now mine. And she died of exhaustion when I was 15, working 3 jobs so I could go to school, so I could have opportunities she never had." The crowd was completely silent, each person processing this revelation from the business magnate many believed had been born into privilege. "When I saw you this morning being humiliated, holding that coffee so carefully, protecting your baby with every fiber of your being," Marcus continued, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I saw my mother. I saw her dignity, her strength, her unwavering love, and I knew I couldn't stay in the shadows a second longer. He turned to Frank Davis and the other construction workers who had identified themselves. All of you, who were threatened, who remained silent out of fear, I understand. And I promise you, that fear ends today. No one else will be silenced on my properties. No one else will choose between safety and justice. Then he looked at Patricia Olson. And you, who found the courage to speak despite the risk, will be rewarded for that bravery, not punished. I need you to help me clean every corner of my organization, where corruption has taken root. Finally, he turned back to Chloe, pulling a business card from his pocket. Mrs. Ramirez, I'd like to hire you, not out of charity, but because someone with your character, your strength, your ability to see humanity where others only see service, is exactly the kind of person I need helping me rebuild the culture of my company. Chloe took the card with trembling hands, unable to fully process everything that had happened in the last few hours. Her life had been shattered, rebuilt, and transformed in the space of a single morning. But before any professional decision, Eleanor intervened, her voice weak but firm. This young woman needs to rest, process, grieve for her husband properly now that she knows the full truth. Richard nodded in agreement. And she needs to prepare to be a mother. A baby doesn't wait for the world to get fixed before arriving. Chloe instinctively placed her hands on her belly, feeling a kick as if her child was responding to all the day's emotion. And for the first time since this nightmare had begun, she smiled through her tears. Daniel, she whispered to the sky, your son will know the truth. He will know that his father was a hero who died defending what was right. And I promise he will grow up in a world where being brave doesn't mean being a victim. The crowd began to applaud, slowly at first, then more strongly, until Guardian Angel Plaza resonated with the sound of hundreds of hands, joining in recognition that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The exact moment when justice found its voice in the most unexpected places. But as everyone celebrated this moment of triumph, no one noticed the figure watching from a window on the top floor of Sterling Tower. A figure whose face was invisible due to the reflection of the sun on the glass, but whose presence implied that this story was far from over, because where there is corruption, it is rarely just one person. It is a network, a system, a hierarchy of accomplices. And though they had caught one fish, the sharks still swam in deeper waters. The real battle was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since that day in Guardian Angel Plaza. But for Chloe Ramirez, every moment felt like living in two simultaneous realities. In one, she was the pregnant widow who finally knew the truth about her husband's murder. In the other, she was the center of a media storm that had transformed her case into a national symbol of corporate injustice. The small apartment room she shared with her younger sister, Dani, was lit by the dim afternoon light when the doorbell rang. Chloe struggled to get up from the sofa where she had been reviewing documents that Detective Laura Chen had asked her to sign. Her 7-month belly made every movement more challenging. I'm coming, she announced, wiping away the tears that seemed to be her permanent state these days. Every paper she signed, every statement she gave, was like reliving Daniel's death over and over again. When she opened the door, she found not only Detective Chen, as she expected, but also Marcus Sterling and an older woman she didn't recognize. The stranger had completely silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, and her brown eyes studied Chloe with an intensity that was unsettling but not threatening. Mrs. Ramirez. Detective Chen entered first, her expression serious. I'm sorry to show up unannounced, but there are developments in the case you need to hear immediately. Chloe's heart began to beat faster. What kind of developments? Marcus was the one who replied, his voice laden with a tension that hadn't been present in their first meeting. We've discovered that the corruption network is much deeper than anyone imagined. And you, Mrs. Ramirez, are in danger. Danger? Chloe instinctively put her hands to her belly. What do you mean? The older woman finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but it carried a weight of authority earned from years of experience. My name is Dr. Eleanor Vance. I'm a forensic psychiatrist, and I've been working with the prosecution on this case. Specifically, I've been evaluating Victoria Caldwell since her arrest. They paused in Chloe's small living room, where Dani appeared from the kitchen with curious, worried eyes. At 19, she had temporarily left her college studies to care for her older sister during this difficult time. Should I be worried? Dani asked directly, always more confrontational than her older sister. Yes, Detective Chen didn't sugarcoat the truth. Victoria Caldwell has been talking a lot, and what she's revealed suggests that the attempt to silence Daniel Ramirez was not an isolated operation, but part of a pattern of intimidation and elimination that has been going on for years. Chloe felt her legs give way again, that feeling that had become so familiar. Danny rushed to her side, helping her sit on the sofa, while Marcus hurried to bring her a glass of water. "How many people?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling. "How many people have died because of this?" Dr. Vance sat across from her, her movements deliberate and calm. "Victoria has identified at least 5 cases in the last 3 years, where workers who threatened to expose irregularities suffered convenient accidents. But the most disturbing thing is that she wasn't the primary executor. She was just a piece in a larger machine." "Who is behind all this?" Dani demanded, her youth making her less able to contain her indignation. "They have to have a name." Marcus exchanged a significant glance with Detective Chen before replying. "Victoria's husband, Richard Caldwell, was definitely part of the operation, but since his arrest 2 weeks ago, he has also begun to talk, and the names he's mentioned," he paused, clearly struggling with how to present the information. "Include people in very high positions of power, not just in my company, but in municipal government, in the construction inspection department, even in the district attorney's office." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that precedes earthquakes. Chloe processed each word as if they were pieces of a puzzle that, once completed, would reveal a monster much larger than she had imagined. "You're saying," Chloe spoke slowly, making sure she fully understood, "that the people who should protect workers like Daniel are the same ones who are killing them or allowing them to die by looking the other way?" "Doctor," Vance confirmed. "The system was designed so that people at the bottom remained invisible, and when someone like Daniel threatened to make the invisible visible, he became a problem that needed to be eliminated." Chloe closed her eyes, feeling a rage so deep it seemed to emanate from her very bones. "My husband died because he dared to have a conscience, because he believed doing the right thing mattered. And now," Detective Chen continued gently but firmly, "we need you to be just as brave as he was. Because Victoria mentioned something else in her confessions, something that specifically involves Daniel." Chloe's eyes snapped open. "What?" Marcus pulled a manila envelope from his briefcase, holding it as if it were something precious and dangerous at the same time. "Before he died, Daniel apparently sent something to someone, documents he photographed, evidence he collected, but we have no idea who he sent them to or where they are." "To me?" Chloe asked, confused. "I never received anything from Daniel," except she stopped abruptly, her face paling as a repressed memory surged like a wave, "except a package that arrived 3 days after his death. I thought it was something he had ordered before the accident. I stored it in the building's storage unit without opening it because I couldn't bear to see his things." Dani was already on her feet, running toward the door. "I'll go get it right now!" "Wait." Detective Chen stopped her. "If that package contains what we believe it contains, we need to handle it as official evidence, and we need to make sure no one else knows we're retrieving it." The paranoia that had been growing in the room now felt like a physical presence. Chloe looked around her own home, as if it were suddenly enemy territory. "Do you think someone is watching me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Vance replied with brutal honesty. "We believe that if the people behind this knew that physical evidence Daniel collected exists, they would do anything to retrieve it. And anything includes threatening you and your baby." Pure terror crossed Chloe's face. Her hands moved protectively over her belly, where her child kicked as if they could feel their mother's fear. "I'm not going to let anything happen to them." Marcus spoke with a steely determination that made everyone in the room look at him. "I've hired private security. From this moment on, you and your sister will have 2 4-hour protection." "I don't need your charity," Chloe replied automatically. The pride that had sustained her through months of adversity, surfacing even amidst fear. "It's not charity," Marcus responded softly. "It's responsibility. This happened on my property, under my supervision, because I wasn't vigilant enough to see the corruption growing like cancer in my own organization. I owe this to Daniel. I owe this to every worker who trusted me to keep them safe." There was something in his voice, a raw vulnerability that made Chloe truly see him for the first time. Not as the business magnate, not as the savior who had appeared in the plaza, but as a man carrying his own weight of guilt and loss. "Your mother," Chloe said softly, remembering what he had revealed weeks ago. "You said she died of exhaustion." Marcus nodded, his eyes showing a pain that time had softened but never completely eliminated. "Maria Sterling worked until her last breath so I could have a better life. And I swore that when I had the power to change things I would, but I got distracted with profits, with expansion, with building an empire. And, While I was building upwards, I didn't see what was rotting in the foundations. Detective Chen, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional direction of the conversation, took back control. "We need to retrieve that package tonight, Mrs. Ramirez. Can you describe exactly where it's stored?" Chloe nodded, wiping away tears that had started to fall again. "It's in storage unit B7 in the building's basement. The lock is a simple combination, 1508. The date Daniel and I met." Danny moved closer to her sister, taking her hand. "I'm coming with you." "You're not facing this alone." "No," Chloe replied firmly. "If something goes wrong, I need you to be safe. Please, Danny, promise me you'll stay here with the protection Mr. Sterling provides." Tears streamed down Danny's face, but she nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Then, it's decided." Detective Chen stood up. "We'll go tonight, discreetly. Mrs. Ramirez, you'll come with us, but you'll remain in the vehicle with protection while we retrieve the package." 2 hours later, under the cloak of darkness that had fallen over the city, a discreet convoy of 3 vehicles headed towards Chloe's apartment building. In the middle vehicle, Chloe sat next to Dr. Vance, who had insisted on coming to provide emotional support. "How do you do it, Chloe?" she asked suddenly, breaking the tense silence of the ride. "How do you listen to people like Victoria confess horrible things and not lose faith in humanity, Doctor?" Vance considered the question carefully before answering. "Because for every Victoria Caldwell who chooses cruelty, there are 10 Daniel Ramirezes who choose bravery. For every corrupt system, there are 1,000 ordinary people like you who refuse to be broken by injustice." "I don't feel brave," Chloe confessed. "I feel terrified. Terrified for my baby, for Danny, for what comes next." "Courage is not the absence of fear." Dr. Vance smiled sadly. "It's the decision to continue despite the fear. And you, my dear, have been demonstrating that kind of courage every day you choose to get up, every time you hold your head high, every moment you protect your unborn child from a world that has been cruel to you." They arrived at the building, and the operation began with military efficiency. Detective Chen and 2 undercover officers entered the building, while Marcus remained in the vehicle with Chloe and Dr. Vance, his presence a silent wall of protection. The minutes dragged like hours. Chloe counted every heartbeat, every kick of her baby, every passing second feeling like an eternity. And then her phone rang. It wasn't a number she recognized, but something compelled her to answer. Mrs. Ramirez. A male voice, harsh and clearly disguised, spoke from the other side. "I know what you're looking for, and I know you'll never find it because I already have it." Icy terror settled in her veins. "Who are you?" "Someone who cares a lot about certain information remaining buried. Your husband made a mistake by collecting that evidence. Don't make the same mistake by trying to use it." "You killed him!" Chloe hissed, rage overcoming fear. "You or someone you know killed Daniel." "Your husband killed himself by not understanding how the real world works," the voice replied with a coldness that was more terrifying than any direct threat. "But you still have time to be smart. You have a baby to raise, a life to live. Forget this crusade, and maybe, just maybe, your child will get to know its mother." The call cut off before Chloe could reply. Her hands trembled so violently that she almost dropped the phone. "What happened?" Marcus demanded, seeing her reaction. Before she could explain, Detective Chen ran out of the building. Her expression was pure panic. "Let's go now!" she yelled, as she and the officers rushed towards the vehicles. "What happened?" Marcus asked, as the driver immediately sped off. The storage unit was empty. Detective Chen panted, clearly having run. "But that's not the worst part. We found this nailed to the unit door." She pulled out a photograph protected in an evidence bag. It was of Danny, taken from outside Chloe's apartment window that same night, less than an hour ago. And written on the back in red ink were the words, "One life for a secret. You choose." The cry that came from Chloe was primal, visceral. "Danny!" Marcus was already dialing numbers on his phone, contacting the security team he had left, protecting Chloe's younger sister. But the calls went straight to voicemail, one after another after another. "Drive faster." Marcus ordered the driver in a voice that brooked no argument. Chloe was hyperventilating now, her hands on her belly, feeling her baby's frantic kicks responding to her distress. "No, no, please, God. No, my sister. No. Danny, she's just a child. Doctor." Vance tried to calm her, but even her trained professionalism was being tested by the gravity of the situation. When they finally arrived at Chloe's apartment, the door was open, the lights were on, but there was no sound, no movement, nothing except a silence that screamed that something terrible had happened. Detective Chen entered first, her weapon drawn, while her officers secured the perimeter. Marcus tried to prevent Chloe from entering, but she pushed him with a force her pregnant state shouldn't allow, driven by a maternal terror that surpassed any consideration of safety. "Dani!" Her cry filled the empty space. The living room was intact, the kitchen too, but when they reached the small bedroom Dani used, they found signs of a struggle. An overturned lamp, scattered books, and on the bed pillow, another message. This time it wasn't a written note. It was a cell phone, clearly not Dani's, playing a video on loop. The video showed Dani, gagged but unharmed, her eyes full of tears but also of rage, and a voiceover said, "You have 48 hours to forget everything about Daniel Ramirez's case. Withdraw all lawsuits, all statements, disappear in silence, or the next time you see, your sister will be in a coffin." Chloe collapsed to the floor, sobs, shaking her entire body as she hugged herself and her unborn baby. Her entire world had crumbled again, but this time, it was worse because it was her fault. Her quest for justice had put Dani in danger. Marcus knelt beside her, completely ignoring protocol, and simply held her as she cried. He didn't say everything would be okay because he couldn't promise that. He didn't say they would find her because he didn't know if it was true. Instead, he whispered the only words that mattered at that moment. "You are not alone. I won't let you face this alone." And as Detective Chen coordinated search teams, as Dr. Vance called hostage crisis specialists, as the apartment filled with officers and forensic technicians, Chloe Ramirez made a decision. She wasn't going to forget. She wasn't going to back down. She wasn't going to let fear silence her, as they had tried to silence Daniel. Because now it wasn't just about justice for her dead husband. It was for her living sister. It was for her unborn child. It was for every person who had ever been threatened, intimidated, or killed for daring to stand up for what was right. And as she wiped her tears and stood up with steely determination, a single phrase escaped her lips, a promise that would resonate through everything that came after. "They are going to regret the day they decided my family was expendable." War had been declared, and this time Chloe Ramirez wouldn't be the victim. She would be the storm. Dawn found Chloe Ramirez in a place she had never imagined setting foot, the crisis room at Sterling Corporation headquarters. The massive windows on the 42nd floor offered a panoramic view of the city beginning to wake up, but she saw nothing except Dani's face in that horrible video playing over and over in her mind. Decaf coffee. Marcus appeared beside her, offering a steaming cup. "Dr. Vance insisted you avoid caffeine for the baby, but I thought you needed something warm." Chloe took the cup with hands that still trembled slightly, noticing for the first time that 18 hours had passed since Dani's kidnapping. 18 hours of continuous nightmare where every minute felt like an eternity. "Anything new?" she asked, though her voice betrayed that she already knew the answer from the expression on Marcus's face. "Detective Chen is tracing the origin of the video. Technical experts say it was recorded somewhere in the industrial district." He paused, clearly struggling with the next words. "But there's something else, something you need to see." He led Chloe to a conference room where Detective Chen, Dr. Vance, and 3 people she didn't recognize were gathered around a table covered with documents and photographs. "Mrs. Ramirez." Detective Chen stood up, her face showing a mixture of compassion and urgency. "These are federal agents, Monica Stevens and George Miller, and Assistant District Attorney Andrew Thompson. This case has just escalated to the federal level." Chloe felt her legs give way again, but this time she forced herself to remain standing. "Federal?" Assistant District Attorney Thompson, a man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much, replied gravely, "Because what your husband discovered was not just local corruption. It was part of an international money laundering operation, involving cartels, high-level government officials, and multinational corporations." The silence in the room was so dense, it seemed solid. Chloe instinctively placed her hands on her belly, where her baby kicked strongly, as if responding to their mother's attention. "Cartels?" She repeated the word, feeling surreal. "My husband was a construction worker." "How?" "Because he saw something he shouldn't have seen." Agent Stevens approached, spreading photographs on the table. Months ago, during the construction of the executive floor of Sterling Tower, a state-of-the-art security system was installed. But before it was officially activated, Daniel was doing electrical work in that area and accidentally activated the cameras. They recorded a meeting. Agent Miller continued, pointing to a blurry photograph. A meeting between Richard Caldwell, 2 government officials who are now fugitives, and this man. He placed another photograph on the table. It was a man of approximately 60, distinguished, with perfectly styled hair and a suit that probably cost more than everything Chloe had earned in her life. "Who is he?" Chloe asked, though something in her instinct already told her that this answer would change everything. "Arthur Sterling Sr., Marcus replied, and there was pure venom in his voice. "My mentor, the man who taught me everything about business after my mother died, the man I trusted more than anyone else in the world." The betrayal in his voice was palpable, and for the first time, Chloe saw beyond the business magnate's facade to the broken man who had discovered that his father figure was a monster. "Sterling Sr. has been using Sterling Corporation properties to launder money for years," Assistant District Attorney Thompson explained. "Inflated construction contracts, shell companies, cash movements disguised as legitimate transactions. And Daniel Ramirez captured evidence of one of their coordination meetings. That's why they killed him," Chloe whispered, the pieces finally fitting together with devastating clarity. "Not just to silence him, but to retrieve that evidence." "But they never retrieved it," Dr. Vance gently intervened, "because Daniel was smarter than them. He hid the evidence in a way that even you didn't know." Chloe looked at them confused, but the package in the storage unit was empty, because that was never the real package. Marcus smiled for the first time in hours, though it was a joyless smile. It was a decoy. Daniel knew that if anything happened to him, they would go after anything obviously connected to him. Agent Stevens activated a laptop, displaying a grainy security video. "This is from the post office near your old apartment, recorded 3 days before Daniel's murder. Watch carefully." Chloe watched the screen, and her heart stopped when she saw her Daniel, alive and moving, entering the post office with a small package. Tears began to fall immediately. The pain of seeing him again was so sharp she could barely breathe. "Keep watching," Marcus said gently, his hand resting on her shoulder in a gesture of support. In the video, Daniel filled out forms, spoke with the clerk, and then paused. He looked at his phone, read something, and his expression completely changed. Instead of sending the package, he left the office with it still in his hands. "He canceled the shipment," Chloe murmured. "Why?" "Because at that moment he received a text message," Agent Miller explained, showing phone records. A message from an unknown number that read, "They know what you have. Your wife is not safe." Horror settled in Chloe's heart like ice. "They were threatening me to control him." "Exactly." Assistant District Attorney Thompson nodded. "So Daniel changed tactics. He couldn't send the evidence to the authorities because he didn't know whom to trust. He couldn't give it to you because it would put you in direct danger. So he hid it with the only people he knew he could fully trust, someone they would never suspect." "Who?" Chloe asked desperately. The conference room door opened, and Richard Hayes entered, followed by Eleanor, who leaned on her cane but walked with determination. In her hands, Eleanor held a small metal box. "Us," Eleanor said simply, placing the box on the table. "Daniel came to us 2 days before his death. He told us that if anything happened to him, we should only hand this over if his wife was ever in real danger, and there were people she could trust to protect her." Chloe stood up so quickly she felt dizzy, walking toward Eleanor with tears streaming down her face. "You knew Daniel? Why did you never tell me?" "Because he made me promise not to," Eleanor replied, her own eyes moist. "He said the less you knew, the safer you would be. But when I met you in that plaza, when you started bringing me coffee every morning with so much love and care, I knew you were exactly the extraordinary person Daniel described," Richard added in a broken voice. "He told us, 'My wife is the strongest person I know, but she carries too much weight alone. If something happens to me, please look after her. Make sure she knows she's not alone. And only when the time is right, when she has the right people to protect her, give her this." Chloe collapsed into a chair, sobbing with an intensity that shook her entire body. Daniel had known her so deeply, had loved her so completely, that even in his death, he had been protecting her, caring for her, making sure she had what she needed when she needed it most. Marcus carefully opened the metal box, revealing a portable hard drive, several USB devices, and a sealed envelope. His expression, as he reviewed the contents, went from curiosity to astonishment to absolute fury. "This is," he began, but words seemed to fail him. "Enough to dismantle the entire operation," Assistant District Attorney Thompson finished, reviewing the documents, audio recordings, videos, documented bank transfers, emails. Daniel Ramirez was a man with no formal education in investigation, but he had something more valuable, an innate sense of justice and the determination of a lion. And he also left this. Eleanor handed the sealed envelope to Chloe. "It's addressed to you, my child." With trembling hands, Chloe opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in Daniel's familiar handwriting, each letter traced with the love she had known throughout their years together. "My beloved Chloe," the letter began, and she had to stop immediately, tears making it impossible to see the words. Marcus gently took the letter from her hands. "Do you want me to read it?" he asked softly. Chloe nodded, unable to speak. Marcus cleared his throat, his own voice cracking as he read. "My beloved Chloe, if you are reading this, it means my worst fears have come true. It means I am no longer there to hold you when you cry, to wipe away your tears when the world is cruel, to remind you every day that you are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known." The room was completely silent, except for Marcus's voice reading and the soft sobs of everyone present. "I discovered things, my love, terrible things, that powerful people have done. And I know that coming forward with this information puts me in danger, but I cannot live with myself if I remain silent while innocent people suffer. You taught me that, Chloe. You, with your tireless kindness, your infinite compassion, your refusal to see people as disposable. I have taken precautions. I have hidden the evidence with good people, the Hayes, who you will meet soon if you haven't already. They are angels, Chloe. Take care of them, as I know you will take care of our baby." At the mention of the baby, Chloe instinctively placed her hands on her belly, feeling her child's strong kicks, as if Daniel himself were there, touching her belly as he used to do. "Our son or daughter will grow up without knowing me, and that is the greatest pain I carry as I write this. But they will grow up knowing you, and that means they will grow up knowing what true love is, what real strength is, what it means to be human in the best possible way. Do not let my death make you doubt your light, my love. Do not let the world convince you that kindness is weakness. It is your superpower. It is what makes you extraordinary. And when the time comes, when you have people you can truly trust, use this evidence, not for revenge, but for justice. Not for me, but for everyone who comes after. Make sure no other family has to mourn, as I know you will be mourning. I love you with every fiber of my being, in this life and in any other that may exist. Take care of our baby. Tell them their father loved them more than words can express. And please, please, Chloe, live fully. Live happily. Live the life we both dreamed of. Forever yours, Daniel. P.S. In the photo, I'm holding the ultrasound from the day we found out we were going to be parents. Look into my eyes, Chloe. That is pure love. That is the love that never dies. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even Assistant District Attorney Thompson, a man hardened by decades of seeing the worst of humanity, discreetly wiped away tears. Agent Stevens had turned to the window, her shoulders shaking with contained emotion. Chloe reached out for the letter, holding it against her heart, as if she could absorb Daniel's presence through the paper. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew they were going to kill him, and yet he didn't back down because he loved more than he feared," Eleanor said softly, sitting next to Chloe and taking her hand. "And because he knew his wife well enough to know that you would finish what he started." "Danny," Chloe said suddenly, her personal grief momentarily pushed aside by terror for her sister. "They have what they wanted. Now we have the evidence. Can we make an exchange?" "No." The answer came simultaneously from Marcus, Assistant District Attorney Thompson, and both federal agents. "What we have here," the prosecutor explained, "is not just evidence against Sterling Sr., it's evidence against dozens of people in positions of extreme power. If they know we have it, they will kill Danny to eliminate witnesses and then come after everyone else too. So what do we do?" Chloe cried out, desperation finally breaking her control. "Do we let them kill her while we build a case? No." Marcus spoke with a determination that made everyone look at him. "We use what Daniel gave us to find her." He documented locations, properties controlled by the organization, places where they carried out their operations. One of those locations has to be where they're keeping Danny. Agent Miller was already at his computer cross-referencing information. There are 3 warehouses in the industrial district that appear in Sterling Sr. Bank transfers, all officially vacant, all perfect for keeping someone hidden. Then we go to all 3. Chloe stood up, her decision made. "Now, Mrs. Ramirez," Dr. Vance gently intervened. "You are 7 months pregnant. You cannot participate in a rescue operation. Watch me." Chloe replied with a fierceness that made even the experienced federal agent step back. "That's my sister. My only family left besides my baby. And I'm not going to sit in a safe room while you decide her fate." "Then, I'm going with her," Marcus declared. "And it's non-negotiable." Detective Chen looked at Assistant District Attorney Thompson, who sighed but nodded. "All right, but with strict conditions. You remain in the vehicles with full protection and only observe. The moment there is real danger, you leave. Understood? Chloe nodded. Though both knew that if Dani was there, no promise of safety would keep Chloe away. An hour later, 3 special forces teams deployed to the 3 locations simultaneously. Chloe was in the vehicle heading to the largest warehouse, her maternal instinct screaming that it was the right place. Marcus was next to her, his presence an anchor of calm amidst the chaos. "How do you do it?" he asked softly. "Do what?" Chloe replied, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Stay on your feet when everything is falling apart. Find strength when most would give up." Chloe looked at her hands, now resting on her belly where her baby moved constantly. "Because I have no choice. Because my baby needs a strong mother. Because Dani needs a sister who will fight. Because Daniel died believing I would finish what he started." "And why?" She added more softly, "If I give up, if I let fear win, then all the people who have suffered, who have died, who have been silenced, it was all for nothing." When they arrived at the warehouse, a massive, dilapidated structure on the edge of the industrial district, something in the air changed. Agent Miller, who was leading this team, raised his hand to halt. "There's movement inside," he whispered over the radio. "Multiple heat signatures, at least 2 people, possibly more." Chloe's heart was beating so loudly she could hear it in her ears. One of them could be Dani. "It's possible," Agent Miller responded, preparing to enter. What happened next unfolded in slow motion and at dizzying speed simultaneously. The team burst into the warehouse, shouts of federal police, echoing in the empty space, sounds of struggling, of people running, and then the sound Chloe had been praying to hear. "We've got her! Secured!" Chloe was out of the vehicle before anyone could stop her, running toward the warehouse with impossible speed for someone in her condition. Marcus and 2 officers ran after her, but she was driven by something stronger than any physical limitation: absolute love. When she entered the warehouse, she saw Dani being wrapped in a thermal blanket by paramedics, her face bruised, but her eyes sparkling with life. And when their gazes met across the cavernous space, both sisters ran to each other, colliding in an embrace that seemed like they would never let go. "I thought I'd lost you," Chloe sobbed, holding Dani as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Never," Dani replied, her voice hoarse but firm. "Because you taught me that the Ramirez women don't give up, no matter what." And as they held each other, amidst the chaos of officers and evidence being collected, Chloe felt something she hadn't felt in months: hope. But that hope would be tested once more, because in the dark corner of the warehouse, a forgotten phone began to ring, and when Agent Miller answered it, his expression changed to one of pure horror. "It's Sterling Sr., he announced, "and he says this is far from over." Arthur Sterling. Sr.'s voice resonated through the phone's speaker with a calmness that was more chilling than any scream. It was the calm of a predator who still believed he held all the cards, who still considered himself untouchable, even as his world began to crumble. "Agent Miller." His tone was almost friendly, as if they were discussing lunch plans rather than a hostage rescue. "Congratulations on finding young Dani. I admit I underestimated her older sister's determination." Chloe felt Dani tremble in her arms, the trauma of days in captivity still fresh. But instead of shrinking, Dani straightened, looking at the phone with a fury that rivaled her sister's. "Mr. Sterling Sr." Agent Miller replied with trained professionalism. "You're surrounded. We have enough evidence to send you to prison for the rest of your life. Surrender now, and perhaps we can discuss terms." The laugh that followed was that of a man who had completely lost touch with reality, or who simply no longer cared. "Surrender? My dear agent, you don't understand how the real world works. I've built a network over decades. I know secrets about people in positions so high your mind can't even imagine." Marcus. Sterling Sr. continued, and it was as if he had thrown a grenade into the middle of the room. "I know you're there. You were always predictable, just like your mother." Marcus Sterling approached the phone. His face showed a mixture of pain and fury that made him almost unrecognizable. "Don't you dare mention my mother." "Why not? After all, I knew her quite well." Sterling Sr. replied with calculated cruelty. "She worked cleaning my offices for years before you were born. Did you never wonder why I took such an interest in your education after her death? Why I made you my protégé?" The silence that fell over the warehouse was the kind of silence that precedes revelations that destroy foundations. Chloe watched as Marcus's face went from confusion to horrified understanding. "No, Marcus," she whispered. "It's not possible." "Oh, but it is," Sterling Sr. continued, clearly enjoying every moment. Your mother didn't die of exhaustion, Marcus. She died because she discovered something about my operations, something I couldn't allow her to reveal. And when she died, your education, your career, everything you built, was bought with blood. Marcus fell to his knees, the weight of this revelation breaking something fundamental in him. Chloe, despite holding Danny, knelt beside him, her hand finding his shoulder in a gesture of silent support. "You're lying, Marcus," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Tell Agent Miller to check the 1998 files. He'll find a natural causes death report that was never properly investigated because I made sure it wasn't." Maria Sterling was too curious, too honest, like Daniel Ramirez, like all the others who have had to be reorganized. Detective Chen, who had been coordinating from her location, interrupted. "Sterling Sr., we're tracing this call. Why are you telling us all this?" "Because, my dear detective, I want you to know exactly who you're dealing with. I want you to understand that even if you catch me, there are 20 more people ready to take my place. The system I built is bigger than me. It's immortal. No system is immortal when the truth comes to light." A new voice entered the conversation. It was Assistant District Attorney Andrew Thompson, who had arrived at the warehouse with additional reinforcements. "And Mr. Sterling Sr., the truth has just come to light in spectacular fashion." "What do you mean?" For the first time, there was a hint of uncertainty in Sterling Sr.'s voice. "I mean that while you've been making this dramatic phone call, we've simultaneously arrested 17 of your associates in 6 different cities. I mean that the evidence Daniel Ramirez collected not only documented your crimes, but also included names, dates, locations of every person in your network. And I mean," Thompson continued with barely contained satisfaction, "that national news is broadcasting, at this exact moment, a special report on the largest corruption operation ever dismantled in this country's history. Your empire is falling as we speak." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. When Sterling Sr. finally spoke, his voice had lost all its previous arrogance. "Marcus, son, I am not your son," Marcus replied, standing up with a dignity that belied the pain in his eyes. "I never was. I am the son of Maria Sterling, a woman who was worth 1,000 of you, and I will spend the rest of my life ensuring her memory is honored, building the opposite of everything you represent." "They have his location," one of the technicians announced. "He's at the Sterling Tower complex, executive floor." "Of course he is." Marcus laughed without humor. He always liked symbolism, the place where it all began. What followed was a coordinated operation involving 3 federal agencies, local police, and special teams. But for Chloe, Danny, and Marcus, the true moment of closure would come hours later, when Sterling Sr. was finally led away in handcuffs from Sterling Tower. The sun was beginning to rise as he emerged from the building, surrounded by federal agents. A crowd of hundreds had gathered. Workers who had been exploited, families of victims who had lost loved ones, journalists capturing every second for posterity. And there, in the front row, behind the police barriers, were Chloe with her prominent belly, Danny holding her hand, and Marcus on the other side. Beside them were Eleanor and Richard Hayes, Dr. Vance, Patricia Olson, Frank Davis, Tony Green, and dozens of other people whose lives had been touched by this story. As Sterling Sr. passed in front of them, his eyes met Chloe's, and at that moment, she spoke with a voice that carried the weight of all who had been silenced. "My husband, Daniel Ramirez, was a better man than you could ever imagine being. He died defending what was right, and his death was not in vain, because it triggered a wave of justice that will drown you and everyone like you." Sterling Sr. opened his mouth to reply, but Chloe wasn't finished. "But I'm not here to get revenge on you. I'm here to let you know that the goodness you tried to destroy multiplied, that every life you took inspired 10 more to stand up for what's right, that your legacy of darkness is being erased by the light of ordinary people who refuse to remain silent. And my child," she placed her hands on her belly, "will grow up in a better world because their father had the courage to challenge monsters like you." The crowd erupted in applause. It wasn't the kind of applause given for entertainment. It was the applause of recognition, of collective liberation, of a weight being lifted from thousands of shoulders simultaneously. As Sterling Sr. was led away, now sobbing uncontrollably, Marcus turned to Chloe. "Your husband would be so proud of you." "I know," Chloe replied, tears streaming freely but with a smile on her face. "Because he knew me better than I knew myself. He knew I would find the strength when I needed it most." Weeks later, on the same bench in Guardian Angel Plaza, where it all began, Chloe sat next to Eleanor. It was early morning, and she had brought 2 coffees as always, but this time there was something different in the air, a sense of closure, but also of new beginnings. How do you feel, my child? Eleanor asked, observing Chloe's belly, which looked like it would burst at any moment, as if she were living the last page of one chapter and the first of another at the same time. Emotional, Chloe replied honestly. The trial begins next week. I'll have to testify. You'll be magnificent, Eleanor assured. You've found your voice, Chloe, and it's powerful. A young man approached them nervously. He was perhaps 22, dressed in a construction worker's uniform, and he carried something in his hands. Mrs. Ramirez? He asked timidly. Yes, Chloe replied, curious. My name is Liam Hayes. I worked at the construction site where your husband died. I never had the courage to speak up before. But after seeing everything you did, after seeing how you pushed back even when they threatened your family, he stopped, clearly struggling with emotions. I wanted to give you this. I found it in Daniel's locker after the accident, but I was too afraid to hand it over back then. He held out a small, hand-carved wooden box. Chloe took it with trembling hands, immediately recognizing the craftsmanship. Daniel had been a talented amateur carpenter, and this box had his unmistakable style. What's inside? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know, Liam replied. It's sealed, but it has his name carved on the bottom. Chloe turned the box over, and there, in perfectly carved letters, was, for Chloe and our miracle, open when you need it most. Tears began to fall before she could stop them. Thank you, she told Liam. Thank you for bringing it to me. Thank you for finally finding the courage. No, Liam replied, his own eyes moist. Thank you for showing all of us that courage is possible. When Liam left, Chloe stared at the box for a long time. Eleanor placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Are you going to open it? Not yet, Chloe decided. Daniel said to open it when I needed it most. And right now I have everything I need. The truth has come to light. Justice is being served, and my baby is about to be born into a world that is a little better than it was. You are wise, my child. Eleanor smiled. Days later, Chloe was in the courtroom, sitting in the witness stand. The room was filled to capacity, with cameras broadcasting live for the entire country. Sterling Sr. sat at the defendant's table, flanked by his expensive lawyers who already knew they were fighting a losing battle. Assistant District Attorney Thompson approached Chloe with respect. Mrs. Ramirez, can you tell us in your own words how your husband, Daniel Ramirez, became a hero? Chloe took a deep breath, her hands resting on her belly, where her baby kicked strongly, as if giving her courage. When she spoke, her voice was clear, firm, filled with a power that came from having survived the impossible. My husband didn't wake up one morning deciding to be a hero. He woke up a good man in a world that often punishes goodness. He saw something wrong and chose not to look away, even knowing the risk. He documented the truth, even when the truth was dangerous, and he protected his family, even while knowing that protection could cost him his life. But more than that, she continued, her eyes sweeping over the room, pausing briefly on each face that had been part of this journey. Daniel Ramirez taught me that true love isn't just pretty words. It's action. It's sacrifice. It's choosing what's right, even when the easy thing is right in front of you. And his legacy is not his death. His legacy is that his death meant something, that it exposed a system of corruption that had been destroying lives for decades, that it inspired dozens of people to finally find their voices and speak out, that it showed that an ordinary person, armed with nothing more than conscience and courage, can change the world. When her testimony concluded hours later, she had documented every detail, answered every question, endured every attempt by defense attorneys to discredit her, and when she finally stepped down from the stand, the entire room rose in a spontaneous ovation that even the judge did not try to stop. 3 weeks later, the verdict came. Guilty on all counts. Sterling Sr. and his associates faced life imprisonment without possibility of parole. But for Chloe, the true verdict had come much earlier, in the form of a system finally forced to acknowledge its flaws. The night after the verdict, Chloe was in her apartment when she felt the first contraction. Danny Beautiful panicked, scrambling to gather the hospital bag while calling everyone. But Chloe remained surprisingly calm. Wait, she told her sister. There's something I need to do first. She went to her bedroom and took the wooden box Liam had given her weeks ago. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal and slowly opened it. Inside were 3 things. A photograph of Daniel holding an ultrasound of their baby, his face radiant with pure joy. A small religious medal that had belonged to his mother, and a letter. With tears streaming down her face and contractions beginning to intensify, Chloe read, My beloved Chloe, if you are reading this, It means our baby is about to arrive. It means you survived everything I feared you might face. It means you are even stronger than I always knew you were. This medal belonged to my mother. She gave it to me when she was your age, telling me it would protect me in the darkest moments. I don't know if it works by magic or by the power of believing in something greater than ourselves, but I want our child to have it as a reminder that they come from a line of people who faced impossibilities and still found ways to love, to fight, to persist. I cannot be there to see our baby's first smile, to hear their first word, to teach them to walk. But I will be there in every lesson you teach them about kindness. In every moment you show them that standing up for what's right matters. In every instant you prove that love is stronger than fear. You are the perfect mother for our child, because you are the bravest person I know. Not for not being afraid, but for being afraid and choosing courage anyway. Name them with hope, raise them with love, and tell them their father loved them since before they existed. Forever yours, Daniel. P.S. In the photo, I'm holding the ultrasound from the day we found out we were going to be parents. Look into my eyes, Chloe. That is pure love. That is the love that never dies. Chloe held the photograph against her heart as another contraction hit, stronger this time. She looked into Daniel's eyes in the image, saw the absolute love there, and knew with certainty that he would be with her every step of what was to come. It's okay, she told Danny, who appeared in the doorway with the hospital bag. Now we can go. The birth was long but uncomplicated, and when finally, after hours of labor, Chloe held her son in her arms for the first time, the whole world seemed to stop. He was perfect. He had Daniel's eyes, his nose, that same expression of perpetual wonder at the world. And when Chloe looked at him, she saw not just her son, but everything they had fought to protect, everything Daniel had died defending, everything the future could be. "Hello, little Marcus Daniel," she whispered, naming him after the two men who had protected her family. "Your daddy would have loved you so much." As if in response, the baby gripped her finger with a strength that seemed impossible for someone so small. And at that moment, Chloe felt something she hadn't felt in months. Complete peace. Danny was crying in the corner of the room. Eleanor and Richard had arrived with flowers. Marcus Sterling appeared with a giant teddy bear and moist eyes. Dr. Vance brought children's books about heroes. Patricia Olson, Frank Davis, Tony Green, Detective Chen, Assistant District Attorney Thompson, they all came, turning the hospital room into a celebration of life, of hope, of chosen family. "Daniel would be so proud," Marcus said softly, looking at the baby in awe. "He is," Chloe replied with certainty. "I feel it. In every heartbeat of this baby, in every breath they take, Daniel is here." 2 days later, when Chloe took little Marcus Daniel home for the first time, she found an envelope waiting for her at her door. Inside was a letter from the president of the National Labor Rights Council, informing her that Daniel Ramirez would be posthumously honored with the Presidential Medal of Civilian Valor, the highest decoration the country awarded. But more important than any official medal was what she found inside the envelope. Letters, hundreds of them from workers across the country who had heard Daniel's story and had found the courage to report their own unsafe working conditions, from families who had lost loved ones in similar accidents and now finally had hope for justice, from young people who had been inspired to study law, social work, investigative journalism, all wanting to be part of creating the change Daniel had initiated. Chloe read each letter, crying and laughing at the same time, as her baby slept peacefully in her arms. Daniel had not died in vain. His death had ignited a silent revolution of consciousness, of ordinary people choosing to be extraordinary. Months later, on the first anniversary of Daniel's death, a monument was unveiled in Guardian Angel Plaza. It was a bronze statue of a construction worker looking upwards with determination, holding in one hand the tools of his trade and in the other a document representing the truth he had stood for. On the plaque at the base was engraved, "Daniel Ramirez, ordinary hero," reminding us that true courage comes not from power, but from conscience, not from wealth, but from values, not from position, but from the choice to stand up for what is right, no matter the cost. And beneath, the words Chloe had insisted on, including, "His legacy is not his death, but the lives he changed by choosing to see when others looked away." The dedication ceremony drew thousands. Chloe was there, holding Marcus Daniel, who was now almost a year old, and babbling happily. Danny was by her side, now back in college studying social work, determined to help vulnerable families. Eleanor and Richard, despite Eleanor's deteriorating health, wouldn't have missed this day for anything in the world. Marcus Sterling was there too, but not as a business magnate, but as the founder of the newly established Maria and Daniel Foundation, dedicated to protecting workers' rights and supporting families of victims of corporate negligence. When it was Chloe's turn to speak, she approached the microphone with her son in her arms. The afternoon sun created a golden halo around her, and for a moment, everyone present simply paused to admire the pure strength of this woman who had survived the impossible. "A year ago," her voice began, clear and strong, "my husband walked to his death defending what was right, and I thought that would be the whole story. A good man, destroyed by a corrupt system. I thought darkness had won, but I was wrong." She continued, looking at the thousands of faces in front of her. "Because Daniel didn't die, he transformed. He became a symbol, an inspiration, a reminder that each of us has the power to change the world if we simply choose bravery over fear. This monument is not just for my husband," Chloe continued, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It's for every person who works in silence, keeping our society functioning. For every mother who wakes before dawn to give her family a better life. For every father who risks his safety because there is no other option. For every worker who has been invisible, ignored, discarded. Daniel saw them, valued them, and died, ensuring the world would see them too. And now, she lifted her son towards the sky. This little being will grow up knowing their father was a hero. Not the kind of movie hero with capes and superpowers, but the kind of real hero this world desperately needs. Someone who simply refused to remain silent in the face of injustice." The crowd erupted in applause that lasted several minutes, and when it finally died down, something magical happened. One by one, people in the crowd began to approach the monument, leaving flowers, notes, photographs of their own loved ones, who had been victims of labor injustice. Construction workers in their uniforms, housekeepers with their aprons, gardeners, janitors, cooks, all the people who keep society running but are rarely seen. And each one, as they left their offering, murmured the same phrase that had become a battle cry: "We are not invisible." As the sun began to set over Guardian Angel Plaza, Chloe sat on the same bench where it had all begun a year ago. Eleanor sat beside her, more fragile now, but with eyes that still sparkled with life. "How did it end up like this?" Chloe asked in amazement, watching the spontaneous celebration that had formed around the monument. "A cup of coffee. That's all it was at first. Just a cup of coffee for a kind old lady on a bench." "No," Eleanor gently corrected. "It was kindness, in a world that had forgotten its value. It was humanity in a system that had stopped seeing people. It was love in its simplest, most powerful form. And that," she added, taking Chloe's hand, "is what transforms the world. Not grand heroic gestures, though those matter too, but millions of small acts of kindness that multiply, that expand, that eventually create waves that cannot be stopped." Little Marcus Daniel chose that moment to wake up, looking around with those curious eyes that were so much like his father's. And when his gaze met Daniel's monument, he reached out his little hands as if wanting to touch it. "Daddy!" he babbled, his first clear word. Chloe froze, tears instantly streaming down her face. "Yes, my love, that's your daddy. And even though you can't see him, he's here. He's always been here, in every act of kindness, in every moment of courage, in every person who chooses to stand up for what's right." As the sunset painted the sky in golden and pink hues, Chloe held her son against her heart and whispered a promise to the wind. A promise she knew Daniel would somehow hear. "We did it, my love. We took your sacrifice and turned it into something beautiful. Your death wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of something much bigger. And our son will grow up knowing he comes from love, from courage, from the decision of an ordinary person to be extraordinary when it mattered most. Rest in peace, Daniel Ramirez. Your work here is done, and we will continue your legacy. One cup of coffee, one kindness, one act of courage at a time." And somewhere, in that dimension where love transcends death, Daniel Ramirez smiled, knowing that his family had not only survived but flourished, that his sacrifice had meant something, and that his love would continue to multiply through generations. Because in the end, that is the truth. No darkness can extinguish. Love always wins. Not immediately, not without a fight, not without tears and sacrifice, but eventually, inevitably, love wins. And that victory, built on the shoulders of ordinary people who choose to be extraordinary, is the sweetest of all.